What is one thing that every female athlete should know about her own body that most don't?
They should know that it's about their bodies, but it's about actually so much more than that. And too often in the media, it is too much about hips and hormones and not enough about all the other things that they can control in their environment and what they can do as an athlete.
How much do you think mental load management has a role to play in developing our elite athletes?
Getting to training when your mind's still spinning of all the other things, I found that really challenging. I think for athletes, trying to figure out what the right balance for the individual is and working with people that can help. Everyone's a little bit different.
What causes women to do ACLs more than men? Welcome to 40G. Female athletes tear the ACL from 2 to 5 times more frequently than their male counterparts. In football specifically, women are up to 6 times more likely to suffer an ACL injury than men. And in 2023 at the Women's World Cup, almost 30 players missed out because of it. And as for concussion, a 2024 study of women and girls playing community Australian football found that 55% reported a previous concussion. That is more than half, and only 25% reported a current injury at the time of survey, meaning that most of them were playing through it. Now, these aren't just bad luck numbers. They are a research gap that is only now being taken seriously, because for decades, most sports science was done on male bodies and just applied to female ones, and women have been paying the price. My guest today is Dr. Brooke Patterson. She is a physiotherapist, a researcher at the Trobe University's Sport and Exercise Medicine Research Centre, and a former elite athlete herself, playing AFLW for Melbourne Demons, arguably the best team going. She played in the competition's inaugural season in 2017 while completing her PhD on knee injuries in female athletes. Her research is now part of a $4.9 million federally funded trial involving more than 10,000 women and girls in Australian football and soccer. And she is here to tell us what the data is actually saying and what needs to change. So, Brooke Patterson, welcome to the 4TG podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kylie.
I've been really looking forward to this topic and to chatting to you especially for many reasons. Number one, and probably most selfishly, coming off the back of an 18-month ACL rehab, I have a lot of questions that I would love to ask you. But I think the most impressive thing about you is that you were a player who has experienced an ACL injury yourself. And now you're on the other end and actually researching what is happening behind the incident rates and the data. So I think you are so invaluable to have that dual perspective, and must make you so much more valuable in the lab too. Have you found that you've been, a little bit more popular in terms of people coming to ask you for your advice, having been through it and lived it yourself?
Look, I think it definitely helps with the passion and the drive every day that, you kind of, know what it's been like. It's a long rehab, but maybe we need a, offline chat, Kylie, for some rehab advice. But I think being able to combine that lived experience plus the physio and coaching, it does help. And we have a lot of people here at the research centre that have those multiple perspectives. It does kind of help direct the research in the right way if you're kind of keeping that end person in mind.
So before we get into the crux of it all, we always start with our rapid fire questions from Snap Fitness. So I'm going to read out 3 questions, and the first thing that comes to mind, you just shoot with. You ready to roll?
Not really, but let's do it.
I love it. So, game day player kicking a few snags or a breakthrough moment in the lab? Which one gives you the biggest rush?
Or I didn't kick many goals in my career. I'll stick with the science nerd.
You're a midfielder though. You've got an excuse. That's all right. What is one thing that every female athlete should know about her own body that most don't?
I think they should know that it's about their bodies, but it's about actually so much more than that. And too often in the media, it is too much about hips and hormones and not enough about all the other things that they can control in their environment and what they can do as an athlete. That was not a one-word answer, but yeah.
I'll allow it. Yep. No, that warranted a full sentence. And finally, what is something about you that most people don't know?
I'm from Tasmania, a small town called Tulla of 200 people. So maybe, a little bit rough around the edges, but I'm very proud of my Tasmanian heritage. So go the Devils.
Go the Devils. I'm sure very salt of the earth. And have you been to many of the games yet?
Yes, I was with my toddler on the weekend at the VFLW.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant. Well, very exciting things to come for the Tassie Devils. But in that vein, tell us about your childhood and the role that sport played growing up in Tassie.
Tasmania is like sport mad, very much basketball, all the footies, athletics. Yeah, I think coaches really and sport shaped who I am in terms of like work ethic and leadership and respect for others. So, the world always works like that. You kind of, you always end up working, in a field that probably you want to give back to, I think is probably what it comes down to. Like it gave me so much growing up that now, I just feel very fortunate to be kind of working in an area where I can kind of try and leave those sports in a better place. Yeah. So I think I had lots of injuries. I had 8 broken arms and an ACL and
Jesus.
lots of ankles. So I think that kind of has positioned me to kind of go, well, what could, was there anything knowledge or access that I, wish I could have had? My coaches were amazing, but I think, for a lot of junior athletes, they're playing, if they're good at sport, they're often playing a lot of different sports and maybe, subbing out one of those extra running sessions or something for like some strength. If I'd had a little bit more knowledge growing up, then maybe I could have like bulletproofed my body a little bit more for all those.
Yeah, what's with the 8 broken arms? What's going on there?
Well, maybe that's also like, yeah, a lot of a lot of the injury prevention we do now is actually teaching girls how to fall and roll.
Yeah,
There's a
okay.
bit of like societal stuff going on as well that girls don't necessarily develop those skills, jumping out of trees and jumping off things and getting pushed around in the family backyard or the school backyard as much. So yeah, it's about providing those skills, I think. But yeah, I don't know what the go is with me. Just putting my hands out and very active. Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't from any, untoward behavior or being rough around the edges. It was just
Yeah.
simple falling. All right. We'll believe that one. That's okay. But tell us now. So obviously you grew up playing footy and there would have been a period of time where you weren't allowed to play footy anymore before being selected into the AFLW inaugural side. Tell us a little bit about that sort of transition and trajectory for you.
Yeah, so I played competitive basketball, like state for Tassie growing up, and then always loved footy at school and in primary school was the classic, yeah, playing with the boys in recess and lunch and got to high school and dad said, look, it's probably about time you stop playing football with the boys at lunch, but I still got in there in the PE classes and pushed the boys around whenever opportunity I got. So then, yeah, went down that like basketball pathway and I got, I guess, semi-professional level and then wasn't really going anywhere else. I was focusing on my study and thought, well, maybe I've heard a bit about this women's footy and maybe I should go and just go back to my childhood. I was always kicking the footy around and give that a go for a bit of fun, a bit of different. And I heard Daisy Pearce speak in an event. And then I was like, oh, she seems pretty cool. I'll stalk her and see where she's playing. Went down to Darabin Falcons, the growing ground of many AFLW stars. So it was kind of, I guess, yeah, fortunate, good timing to kind of land there at that time. And then the AFLW got announced and that's when I was going okay at footy. I was like, oh, maybe I should start taking this a little bit more seriously. And then that's when, yeah, the draft happened the next year or the year after. And yeah, it was, I think, transitioning from basketball to footy was big learnings. But yeah, you can bring lots of different skill sets from different sports. So I'm always encouraging girls to, yeah, keep those different sports up in
Mm.
their youth. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's obviously something that a lot of the original AFLW players did, like, your Aaron Phillips and all of those who played basketball or another sport quite competitively. And it was their professionalism as well that allowed them to come over and transition into a new sport, as well as many other transferable skills. But I'm interested now, like you obviously have seen the standard of AFLW now, and you're in coaching pathways and doing development programs for the next generation of AFLW players. What is the stark difference between when you started playing AFLW to where it is now?
They're athletes. Like, I mean, yeah, I was probably one of those ones that I was fit and could catch a ball. But now the big difference is the work that is done year round in terms of their physical strength and power and speed and endurance, like all those things that you need. The majority of players on lists are, elite at all of those things. And the big difference you notice now is the players that can kind of come in and already be at that level. There's still a big gap, I think, and we've got a lot of work to do to kind of in that community and pathway program to like bridge that gap in terms of that being a resilient athlete. But that's the biggest difference that I've noticed, and maybe that's my bias. The skills have obviously been massive improvement as well.
Mm. And what was a week in your life like when you started? Because obviously the pay wasn't really there. It was almost non-existent, and you were studying and doing your PhD at the same time. So what did your life sort of look like, and how did you manage to juggle it all?
It's probably maybe similar to your life now at the moment, Kylie. Full-time work, which at the time was, I was doing a PhD, but I was also working as a physio. I kind of dropped that pretty quickly because I couldn't fit it all in. And then getting to the class, I was really lucky that I had a boss or mentor that was very flexible, and I could leave early in the afternoon to get there at maybe 3:30, do physio prep, then go out, do training, football training, or do education first, then football training, then conditioning, then come back in and do gym, and then do recovery, and then have dinner at like 10 o'clock at night. And then, trying to squeeze it all in. So, that probably wasn't conducive to, developing people into the best athletes. So that like, as soon as that kind of switched into more day training, that's when I've seen the biggest lift in the athletic profiles. And, you can have the best skills in the world, but unless you can actually be out there on the park performing physically and healthy, then the skills kind of don't.
And how much do you think we talk about load management, and a lot of that, people just think it's how much you're doing in the gym and how many Ks you're doing in your legs, but how much do you think mental load management has a role to play in developing our elite athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my area of expertise, so I can kind of, I guess, comment on my own. Yeah, like getting to training when your mind's still spinning of all the other things, that I found that really challenging. But then maybe that's because I also really loved like what I was doing with the research stuff. I couldn't kind of switch off from it very well. But yeah, I think for athletes trying to like figure out what the right balance for the individual is, and working with people that can help in the under 16 and 18 program, they're often balancing a lot of different sports and school and everything, and everyone's a little bit different. Like some want to focus more on school, and some want to keep pushing at both sports. So it's just having those reflections, and as an athlete, and talking to your support system around you in terms of, well, what's the best balance for me. It's the same as, people who might be balancing like parenting and stuff and going back to work. And for some people, that's 2 days a week of work. For some people, it's 4, like in terms of that, like mental load and getting the right balance of things in your life. Yeah.
That's right. And then obviously, you've got the financial burden on top of that you have to do all of this to pay the bills. And unfortunately, sport at the moment, it's not really enough, especially at the semi-elite level, to cover anything. And you're not getting, any financial pay, although I must say the resources are getting a lot better, and we're getting better access to facilities and things, which is a huge help. But, just if you think of the men who can turn up to train and they're being paid and compensated for that, it takes a massive burden off. Now, that's not to say that they still have to worry about injury and things like that, which might prevent them from getting their pay, but just that that sort of added layer of, financial stress around a lot of young athletes now as well, who may be doing 3 or 4 part-time jobs just to make ends meet. You add that on top of trying to, eat, recover, sleep, socialize, still, have some form of life outside of footy, and it sort of does become all-encompassing and consuming. So there's no wonder that at that sort of level, a lot of people are dropping out. So it's a matter of funding, but it's also a matter of, how working with what we've got, how can we best help these athletes for where they're at the moment, which from personal experience, my current club, Chloe Giles, who came on the podcast as well, is absolutely fantastic at looking at you as a holistic person as opposed to just the athlete. We talk about what your day's been consisting of, how much sleep you're doing. We do wellness reports, and she practices what she preaches and actually takes really good sort of, insight into what your day's been like, and will adjust your training for it. So the more that we can have people like that in the system too, I think is only just going to help grow women's sport and keep more girls and women in it.
100% spot on. And I think then, a bit of our research that we do here is about supporting women working in sport. There's a lot of barriers to that. That could be a whole another podcast guest that I can get you. But essentially, we need more women who maybe think like that a little bit, also supporting these athletes, because, I worry even, say AFLW is an example, they're getting good pay now to support themselves now, but I worry that they're just, okay, well, I'm not going to worry about study. I'm not going to worry about career outside of footy now
Mm.
because I'm getting enough to get by, but it's still not enough to kind of set them up for life kind of thing. So we still need to be supporting these athletes holistically at the moment.
That's right. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse that there's not enough money in it yet, that we still do have to worry about having a job or having, a university degree, which I think is where the men sometimes is their downfall, and that they're getting drafted at, 17, 18. They've been promised the world and they think that they're going to live out a 20, 15, 20-year career. And unfortunately, the very, very few get to do that. And it can just be one injury and then that's career ending. They've got nothing to fall back to. Their whole identity has been sport. And then that's when, there's lots of issues around who am I without sport? I've got no skills or career or work experience to back myself up. So I still believe that the American system is a good system where they have to still get their marks and get some form of degree or work experience in order to keep playing sport, because the transition after sport is a massive area that still is untapped and still needs a lot more work put into it. And I think clubs can do more to that once that player may no longer be able to play, we don't just cut them and forget about them. We try and say, right, what role within the club can you pursue? Whether it might be social media or it might be coaching, whether you might want a more admin role. I think there needs to be a better duty of care to these athletes once they stop playing.
Yeah, and even at community level, we always encourage coaches to keep those girls who are injured engaged and try and encourage them to come along to training. We know dropout is a massive problem in those adolescent years. And if there is, it might not even be a significant injury, but as soon as they lose that connection with the club, then that can be just an additional barrier for them to turn up the next season.
100%. And for you, so you started playing AFLW, but you were already completing your PhD on knee injuries in female athletes. So what was it like for you watching your research play out in real time with your own teammates, with yourself and with your competitors?
Yeah, it's been a really cool journey. And I guess just, proud of the whole team here, that what we've been able to do for the sport and give back. And personally, I think it's just about that, like kind of giving back to the sport and trying to leave it in that better place. So I think it's definitely helped. Like a lot of other sports around the world, injury prevention is like an implementation problem now. It's not that we don't have the evidence. It's about getting it out there and getting people using it. So I think probably what helped is not only me, but we had a lot of people that were working in AFLW or in other women's sports. I think having the people in the team and involving what we would say like consumer involvement, so involving community and elite coaches, athletes, administrators. I think over a 3 or 4 year period, we consulted about 70 different people in the industry. And I think that's what has helped with the impact of Prep to Play and getting the word out there, and the AFL kind of embedding it in their kind of routine practice. It's on the website. People know about it. Whether people are using it, that's another kind of, I think we'll get to that. But I think all of that together has helped. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the Prep to Play stuff that you have done for people who don't know what it is or what it sort of involves. What is it and who is it for?
Yeah, I guess it really did come from when I was playing AFLW and having that history of ACL injury, and I was already doing ACL injury PhD, but that was more about long-term effects of ACL injuries and arthritis. And we kind of thought, well, new competition, girls coming from other sports with a history like me of ACL, maybe ACL injuries are going to be a problem in AFLW. And so we already started like early conversations with the AFL. And there were some people in there at the time that were really supportive of our ideas to go, well, let's look at the evidence, see what can ACL injuries be prevented in other sports. We found a lot of strong evidence in soccer that if you implement exercise-based programs, so neuromuscular warm-up, some strengthening, you can reduce ACL injury risk by about 40 to 60%. So then we thought, well, let's look at all those other programs that have had some good evidence and put an Australian football flavour on it and make it quite sport specific. And that's when we consulted all the coach educators of the AFL, coaches, athletes. But that was, about 2 or 3 years of work where we started with the elite. So a researcher here, Andrew Bruder, was leading a bit of that work with me, designing a set of recommendations for AFLW clubs. Like, this is what the evidence says. Make sure you're ticking off all of these things in your movement prep, your training, your strengthening, your individual preparation. And then we thought, well, women's and girls' participation is booming off the back of AFLW, and the AFLW girls were up to 9 or 10 times higher risk of ACL injury compared to men in those first few years. We didn't have good data in community level, but we thought, well, maybe it's probably going to be similar and a high priority kind of to try and reduce these injuries in communities. So that's when we, took that evidence and recommendations and created Prep to Play, which is the injury prevention program that's on the AFL website. Now it's a warm up, which includes 8 activities. It's football skills focused on contact, so tackling, ground balls and aerial. And it's a strength program designed to replace your typical cool down jog stretch at the end of training with much better spending time on a couple of strengthening exercises and stretching there. Yeah, so I guess that was the crux of it up until 2019 is when we put those resources out online and giving it the full journey here. But we then thought, well, great, we've done our job. It's up, it's online, it's there. But we thought, well, are people using it? We don't know. So we did survey and interviews, and there was about 80% of coaches that were aware of Prep to Play. This is a nationwide survey, but few were actually kind of using it regularly or using like all elements of it, and just kind of saying that they lack the confidence and the skills to do it, which we find that in lots of other fields. So, after 2019, when the resources were online, we did a survey and 80% of coaches were aware of it, but very few were using it regularly, lacked the confidence and skills to use it. I guess this perception that it was something that physios or health and exercise professionals should be implementing, but it really was very much designed for coaches and athletes and parents to be able to just pick up and use. And so on the back of that, we wanted to design some more like coach education support for community clubs. So we trained up 56 physios across Victoria to then go and deliver workshops with players, coaches, parents, trainers, whoever wanted to come along and show them how to use Prep to Play and get them to actually have a practice of using it. And then they would go down to that each team's training after the workshop and also help them. So this was in a big randomized trial. It was also federally funded back in 2021 and 2022. And so we're essentially comparing teams when they had access just to the online, were they using it while there were injuries? And then after they had the workshops with the physios, did they increase their use of the program and did it reduce injuries? So highlight results from that was the workshops increased the use of Prep to Play fourfold. So great, we got coaches kind of changing their practices, and the more that the teams used the Prep to Play and adhered to all elements, the fewer total injuries they had. So that was lower limb, upper limb, concussion, all combined together. The effects were slightly stronger in the lower limb, not surprisingly, because we'd based it off a lot of those previous knee and ACL injury prevention programs. So that paper was actually just published a few weeks ago. So just providing, I guess, community clubs out there really good evidence that if you get someone down to come and help you, it's going to give those coaches and athletes confidence to use it. And then, the more they use it, the fewer injuries they had.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess it reaffirms sort of that analogy of, you give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Because for a lot of community coaches especially, generally they've been dragged into the role. They've probably got a daughter or a son and they might have played when they were younger. So they don't have this specialist knowledge. And when they get told that they need to implement something else, like they just don't have the bandwidth. So being able to give it to them and educate them and empower them to understand the importance of it and then the value it's going to bring, I think is massive. But also getting to play a buy-in too about why this is important that we do it. It's not just something that we need to tick the box. Like this literally will potentially save you from doing an ACL injury, which is far more reaching than just physical an injury. It's a huge mental injury and has a lot of psychosocial, ramifications as well. So the more that we can empower these community football teams and all sports, really, the better the result's going to be.
Yeah, the coaches and athletes really like the program for I think the potential injury prevention benefits, but it also, it gave them that structure to be organised and just kind of follow the script in a way for, like you say, volunteer parent coaches, just to be able to pick it up and go, okay, this is what I'm doing. They really liked it from a player perspective. It gave players leadership opportunities to go, well, actually, your players could lead the warm-up and the cool-down, and a little bit like we tried to design the activities to be like a lot of partner-based things, so that kind of social, kind of leaning into the girls and the women social interaction as well.
Now, the burning question I've got for you, as probably most listeners do, and it's a very contentious one, It's basically what causes women to do ACLs more than men. And we've all heard it's because you've menstrual cycle or even drinking alcohol or because of our hips. There's obviously a range of issues, but how much of it is biological as opposed to lack of exposure from a young age to contact and even things environmental, like just being on rubbish grounds with potholes and lack of lighting? What's like the main cause? Have you uncovered that one yet?
Look, the $65 million question, if I could answer that, then maybe I would have $65 million. But you kind of, you almost summarized it that, the only thing we have strong evidence for is being born a female. And there's a little bit of like
Bugger.
underlying like anatomical things that are clearly contributing, but then there's other studies that look at those anatomical things and they're not shown to be linked. The other thing that sometimes pops up as a link is family history, which again links to maybe some of those like anatomical things, the shape of the knee and the size and the slope of the knee and the ACL. But again, we can't do anything about that. It's a little bit depressing. So we do tend to try and focus on those other things. And there have been studies that look at biomechanics, that look at, fatigue and load and footwear and the surfaces and things. And, for that athlete that sustains the ACL injury, it's likely a combination of those things. So there's definitely those ones where it's like, yeah, definitely their foot got caught in the turf, and whether they were or they weren't wearing the most appropriate shoes, but like that hasn't been kind of uncovered yet, but it's clearly a factor. And then you have people that maybe haven't had the physical preparation and conditioning and stuff, and they're the things that we kind of try and focus on, but it's not all about that either.
So in summary, it's a pretty complex issue. Is that what we're getting at? TBC. No, but I think it's a really important thing to know. Like, you hear people that probably are so focused on the one element, but in reality, as you say, it's a whole host of issues that can be the cause of it. And sometimes it is just pure bad luck in contact. Like I know mine was just bad contact and you can't really prevent that. That's contact sport and that's, the risk that we take. I'm interested to know, do you, within your research, is there any element where you're looking at the psychological factors around stress and the impact that that can have around incidents of not only ACLs, but just injury in general?
Not so much in our research, but some collaborators of ours that have focused on this and doing like interviews with athletes. And, I definitely know my own personal experience, or everyone listening to this would know, when they're stressed at work or whatever it might be, that's when you get sick, right? It makes theoretical sense. Like your body is kind of under attack, whether it's, physically with sickness or mentally with different stresses. So, there's a couple of good case studies and podcasts and stuff. A lot of the WSL players, female elite soccer players in the UK have kind of spoken about some of their experiences and leading before their ACL injury. And the FIF Pro, the Players Association, are doing a big project ACL, exploring a lot of that at the moment, which is awesome to kind of see that research happening, because it's some of those things that are hard to measure but are clearly really important. Probably what I wanted to say, actually, I forgot with your previous question, is the menstrual cycle stuff, which gets thrown around a lot in the media, is that there is no evidence to say that a certain time of the cycle is associated with an increased ACL injury risk. So what we will often say to coaches, athletes at our workshops is, maybe it is a factor, but it's not a reason to go on the pill. It's not a reason to not turn up to training that week because you're at a higher risk. Or in fact, actually, if you, every month you didn't train for a week, then that, from a load management perspective, would be increase your risk of injury of having a load dip every week. So again, it just comes back to that, encouraging athletes to an environment where they can feel safe to come along and say, I'm not feeling my best, whatever that reason might be, but what can you do? Is there something you can do to help your footy, to help you physically, or get involved in another way? Yeah.
So correlation, not causation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that you said too at the start was that how fast women's football has grown in just 7 years. I think it's grown by about 87% from 2015 to 2022 or whatever it was. But that just goes to show too that we probably haven't been able to keep up with the pace that the women's sport has grown. And it's not that we don't care, but research takes a long time, as you know, and there's obviously been a lack in terms of research on women's bodies, because as I said, that we have a lot of research on male bodies and they just, use that for females, but obviously we are a lot different. So, can you tell us now a little bit more about the research gap in female bodies and what that actually looks like in real terms and how more research in the future will help us down the line?
Yeah. So there was a study that I was a part of but didn't lead. So Sally Cowan did this research as a co-ed project. We looked at like the top 4 sports medicine journals in 2008 and 2009, how many research papers had been done on female, women and girl athletes as participants, and then did the same thing 10 years later, 2018, 19. Actually, like the situation hadn't changed. So only about 10 to 15% of all the papers in the world ever published in those top like sports medicine journals were on female participants. And there might have been like a very small percentage increase, but yeah, not really that much different 10 years later. So that was a little bit depressing for us because it's booming, but maybe hopefully we'll see that boom in the next 10-year assessment. I think they are redoing it shortly. Yeah. So we really don't know. We're applying like research and evidence that's been done on men and boys to women and girls. So yeah, it can't necessarily be a copy and paste.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too, as everything does, it obviously costs a lot of money. So we're relying upon government funding and other institutions as well, which is, yeah, it's a tough market at the moment.
Yeah. And the other thing I kind of, I guess, wanted to say about the boom and the increased professionalism is obviously amazing. And the number one thing that I noticed was about the athletes being more powerful. And actually, with ACL injuries, if you've got athletes that are running around faster, jumping higher, more powerfully, that is actually going to increase. And there's research to support this. Like the stronger, more skillful athletes. So, obviously, Kylie, you and I are more likely to get an ACL injury. But it's true, right? Like it makes sense. You can't do your ACL without high force, like running fast,
Mm.
jumping high. And so these athletes are now running around faster and stronger. So theoretically, we probably should have seen the injuries go up, but actually, like, in AFLW, they're actually coming down and staying down. So actually, to me, that's a win. Like, we're not going to
Mm.
cover the $65 million question and get it to zero. But if we can stay stable and the game itself is improving, then that's a win in my eyes. So, and we see that around the world, like when the netball league, professional netball league started here for like they had a big spike in their first few years as well. And then I think we've maybe seen it a little bit internationally in female soccer is there's been a bit of a, the media would call it an epidemic, but I would call it actually like a win if it's staying stable. But it just
Mm.
seems like there's a bit like, increased professionalism in that space and maybe a bit of a spike based on those athletes playing at a higher level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in sport, as we know, there's so many uncontrollables, right? And sometimes it is uncontrollable. But I guess if we're doing everything we can in our control to reduce that rate, well, that's the real win.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never going to be zero, unfortunately. But as we mentioned, that's just a risk you play when you play contact sport. These things are more likely to happen, but there's a lot of more
Well,
far-weighing
actually,
benefits.
70 to 80% of them are non-contact. So that's a big, like, myth-busting thing as well that I think maybe, particularly in contact sports, with coaches, they're like, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. Or no, actually, 70 to 80% of them are non-contact. Those like running out in
Interesting.
space, cutting. So that's like, that lends itself to preventability, right?
Yeah. Okay. That is interesting. That's quite significant, 60 to 80%.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
also in
next
female
million.
women and girls, and that's why the programs have been, like, potentially more effective in women and girls because we get more of those non-contact ones. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So next $1 million question. You've got to earn a lot of money off this podcast here today if you answer all these. What can we do to prevent it? From the girl listening right now who, is taking her sport quite seriously, what are some of the most simple and effective things she can do today to reduce her likelihood of doing her ACL?
Yeah. What sits under all these, programs that reduce injuries by ACL injuries by 50% is things that mimic the injury mechanism. So a lot of the warm-ups, you should be doing a warm-up that includes a lot of like single leg balancing. So that's working on your ankle and hip and knee control and core control. A lot of like jumping and landing, so landing on one leg and getting pushed in the air and being able to kind of control your body and land in that like nice athletic stance. And we do a lot of like footwork and deceleration and change of direction cutting footwork stuff in our prep to play warm up. That's how a lot of the ACL in those non-contact ones happen. So it's about teaching the body how to be exposed to all those different situations that you're going to come into on the field, and that's what your warm up and your movement preparation and things that you might be doing in the gym should replicate, to kind of expose your body. So it's really getting away from that 1990s warm up of, jogging 2 laps and doing a few leg swings on the fence. It's actually doing things that are more, specific and preparing you for the demands of the game, and teaching your body how to move in different ways. And then the strengthening stuff we think is really important as well, obviously for performance, but say like the hamstrings, they attach like through the back of the knee, and they actually kind of they give stability to the knee. So all the muscles obviously give stability. So that's, but particularly say the hamstrings and the calf, they actually kind of resist that ACL injury in a way. They kind of pull like and hold the knee back a little bit. So we think that hamstring Nordics at the end of training, and some stuff away from maybe training as well for extra hamstring calf strengthening would be really important. But strength over stretch at the end of training. So get with a partner, 2 lots of 5 Nordics. You can do reverse Nordics as well for your quads. So to help with a bit more like quad soft tissue injury, and then like core and hip. So partner wheelbarrows, planks, handstands, side planks, Copenhagen. You can check out the resources on Play.FL for a few ideas along those lines.
And these all sound like you don't need a top class gym to do. You just need your body and a partner, right?
Yeah. So we try and encourage coaches to like circle up at the end of training, do your announcements, tell some funny stories, and get it with a partner, and do your 2 lots of 5 Nordics and a couple of those other hip and core ones as well. Yeah.
Now, in terms of concussion, tell us a little bit about that with women's sport. And is that more a style, technique, exposure issue as opposed to anything biological there? Or is it a little bit of both, like the ACL?
Really asking the hard-hitting question.
Oh, yeah.
Some studies have shown a difference between women and men in terms of concussion risk, and particularly in those contact codes. So, if you talk to some people, it's about neck strength and neck width and head size and anatomical things again. But then if you talk to others, they might say, no, it's actually about more the like infancy of women and girls in that sport and technique related factors that you could address with coaching. So, and then there's the real kind of basic scientists, basic as in like not basic, like they're very clever people that look at like the cellular level of like the neurons that in the brain are kind of like that they're different and thinner in women and can get stretched. There's whole heap of things. Where we kind of try and operate again is in that like contact skill development space. So, and this goes for men and boys as well, but maybe just accentuated in women and girls because they haven't had exposure to the tackling and the wrestling and the falling and rolling as a kid.
Yeah.
So it's trying to bring them up and play catch up, I think, with a bit of those things.
And are headgear, or is headgear effective in stopping concussion?
So I was part of a recent International Olympic Committee consensus on female injury prevention. So it's called FAIR. If you want to check it out, there's a website, fairconsensus.com. But essentially we reviewed the whole world of all sports, anyone who'd done any kind of female athlete. A lot of the men and boys studies kind of went in there as well because there wasn't enough in female women and girls. And the only sports that any kind of soft headgear, so the ones that you see that like Australian footy players wearing the kind of padded, but they're not like the hard helmets. In lacrosse and soccer, there's been a handful of studies to show that reduced concussion risk, but for the large part, there's been no evidence that wearing a helmet. The AFL, I think are starting to do a bit more research in this space. We really kind of don't know at the moment. So, I think it's a little bit of a personal preference.
Interesting. And now we've got new technology too with mouth guards that can detect, how hard you've been hit and concussions as well. Have you done much research with those or know the effectiveness of that technology?
No, I haven't done a lot of research. I would like to in the future. At the moment, what we're doing in that space is we're doing a video analysis study in using data or videos from AFLW. So there's independent head spotters, and every time someone hits their head and they think they should look at it, they kind of clip it. We've been looking at all those videos of when people hit their head. Some of them result in concussion, some of them don't, to try and understand what are the most common situations, what are some of the maybe coachable things, what are some of the things that could be addressed by policy or rule changes or better adjudication of those policy and rule changes. We would like to move that space forward into kind of combining it with what, like if players are wearing those mouth guards, what kind of situations are associated with those higher head impact forces. They're good. The mouth guards are good. Like they're giving some really good research. There's also a lot of limitations in them. Like if kids are wearing them and they put them on the ground, they do like it's a lot of noise with them. So I would just kind of caution in terms of like if you're looking at the data, like having someone that kind of knows how to look at it. And yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's good to see more time, money, and effort dedicated towards these sort of technologies. And it's only going to get better as we have more research to go off. And we're sort of getting the baseline now. And, 10, 20 years down the line, hopefully we'll have far more research around these and technologies that can help prevent a lot of this, as well as policies and things around the game to keep it safe, which, as you know, in AFL and AFLW, there's already been changes in rules to try and prevent a lot of these things happening. But if you could say one thing to every governing body in Australia right now, whether that's the AFL, whether that's Netball Australia, about what they sort of owe female athletes when it comes to injury research and prevention, what do you think that would be?
Oh, I guess it's having it in your priorities in the first place. You can have it in your priority and or on a website but it's then, the actions speak the loudest, I guess. Yeah, I think just there's so much appetite for it now. So just kind of, I guess, thinking a little bit outside the box and creatively about how, like, research money from the government's only limited. Like, how can we actually all work together, whether it's the sporting industry, whether it's like other, like, businesses or industries that, how can we actually all pull our resources together to kind of help, do more of the research on the athletes to then that's going to kind of evolve it as a product as well. Yeah.
And then finally, for the athlete who may not be taking prep to play seriously or tackling dangerously, putting themselves at higher risk of either an ACL or a concussion, can you give us a little bit of an insight or, I guess, things that they should consider in terms of the long-term consequences of having either of those injuries?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think particularly in the concussion space, we're doing a study at the moment and trying to understand why people don't report their symptoms. So they've had a head impact, they're feeling not quite right, they've got a headache, but that fear of missing out on games because we all love footy. Trying to unpack that a little bit and what can we do to, support people to kind of prioritize their health. Whether you're rehabbing from any injury, kind of getting the help and support that you need to kind of do the rehab, to look after your long-term health. And as a teammate, you have a big role to play as well. If you see a teammate go down or they're not quite right and they've been hit in the head, like I think we have a real kind of community responsibility to kind of look out for each other because when you're that person that's had their head knocked, you might not be thinking straight. So actually having someone else kind of call it out for you. Yeah, so be a good teammate. Yeah, access, there's lots of good resources out there, but I think, that going back to your earlier question, the sporting organisations can't just sit there online. Like people don't go and, search for things. People are time poor. People are, not impatient, but want kind of things at their fingertips. So I think for those sporting organisations, we need to kind of have more, I would say, more active strategies to, get the word out there and, utilising social media and different avenues to, get the awareness. And then from there, we can support people to kind of, use it. But without the awareness, then there's no point.
Exactly. And I guess to the player as well, it's a matter of reminding them that sport is a very small chapter of our lives and there's no point risking our long-term health just for short-term gain in sport, such as ignoring concussions and symptoms like that or putting yourself at risk because even, from ACLs, there's high chance of arthritis and things like that, which you mightn't think about now while you're young and fit and healthy, but down the line it will affect you and how you move daily. So I think it's important to think about long-term consequences as opposed to just, I don't want to miss 3 weeks of footy if I get a concussion. You've really got to think about your long-term health and well-being.
Yeah, 100%.
So from you now, having experienced absolutely everything, having been the researcher, the athlete, the rehabber, what would you go back and tell your 16-year-old self if you could do it all again?
Yeah, I think I would get in the gym a little bit more. I was doing lots of different sports, morning basketball training, evening basketball training every night of the week. And I have a lot of athletes ask this, like, I want to get fitter. When should I do an extra run? Like, you're already doing enough running in all of those things. Like, get strong. And there's lots of barriers particularly for women and girls in doing that. But I think that is changing. That landscape's changing a lot. What else would I look back? Well, from an injury perspective, particularly my ACL, I was 19. I was studying physio at the time. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I did not. And once you get back to sport, as an athlete, you obviously go, oh yeah, you do all the rehab exercises, but then once you're back, you're like, sweet, I'm back. Like I don't need to do that stuff anymore. You do for, preventing that next injury or a different type of injury or the long-term stuff. So I hate to say it, Kyle, rehab life
Never ends.
but rehab, like, it is more like, it's strength and physical activity for life. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, something to look forward to. And on that vein, what is the incidence of re-injury to ACLs at the moment?
It depends on the age group and the study, but, one in, like, if you're a young female under the age of 25, like maybe like 1 in 4, 1 in 5 might re-rupture. I've seen even higher than that. Yeah, it tends to be that, like, the younger, again, coming back to, maybe they're running faster, putting themselves in, different situations to the older athletes. Yeah. So, and you're often more
okay.
likely to do the other leg than.
Okay, interesting.
So that's another, probably important message is do your rehab on both sides.
Yes, that's very interesting, actually. And I would have thought the other way. So, have definitely learned something here today as well. Well, Brooke, thank you so much for jumping on today. And thank you for what you're doing. Like, as I said, it's such a competitive advantage having an athlete who has lived and experienced all of this actually in the lab doing the research. You've got the right motivation behind you, and you're giving back to women's sports so much by helping the next generation of AFLW players come through. So yeah, seriously, I think on behalf of, the next generation and even the current generation, thank you for all the work that you're doing. It really does mean a lot. And I'm sure that so many of the listeners have taken away a lot of value here today and what they can do individually to try and reduce the incidence of ACL, concussion and other injuries, as well as parents and coaches as well, like about what's out there that they can use and the importance of these prep to play things. It's not just another box that they need to tick. It is something that really can have long-term benefits, I guess, to these young players and their well-being for life after sport as well. So thank you very much for jumping on today.
Thanks, Kylie. My pleasure. And yeah, keep up the good work. And yeah, I'm happy to send through a few links for different sports and stuff we can, link people to.
That would be brilliant. If you've got any resources out there, please do send them through and I'll add them to the show notes. And for everyone listening along, please be sure to go and follow 4TG on all social media, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and be sure to leave a review. And we want to hear more of these type of stories and what you're dealing with at the moment and how we can help you in your sporting journey too. So please check all of this out. And Brooke, I look forward to episode 2 because I think we could have spoken for another 5 hours on many different topics.
Definitely.
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.